Okay folks, here we go with a Patreon members site member image process, and one of my patrons has kindly sent this bracketed sequence of an architectural shot down in the city, Westminster I presume it is, or somewhere, I don't know. I don't like London, it scares me, it frightens me. I'm only a poor little country boy, you know. But yeah, I really do like this image that's been sent in. But as you can see, it's a 6-shot bracket, and bracketing exposures it's become a very, very, very popular way of producing landscape images. And really and truly, I sort of think there's two reasons why people bracket exposures. Is one, because they haven't got the nerve to commit themselves to one exposure, and the other reason some people do it is because they're too bone idle. Now, this particular chap is a very good friend of mine, and I know he's not idle. He's just a little bit unwilling to commit to one exposure, and so, you know, I mean, I can see Jeff's put himself under quite a bit of pressure here, and you know, he's just thought, well, I'm just going to bracket like mad and hopefully we'll get something out of it. But this common trend for shooting bracketed exposure sequences and then doing HDR merges in Photoshop or in Lightroom or in, God forbid, Photomatics. Really and truly, guys, it is, for the most part, totally unnecessary, and you're making a lot of work for yourself. You're either making a lot of work for yourself with the actual exposure blend itself, or you're making a lot of work for yourself by giving yourself, in this case, a choice of 6 images to work from. And which one do you work from? Yeah. The thing is about exposure, and as I keep banging on to everybody, it's all about exposing to the highlight. And this is an excellent composition. The end point for this image that I envisage as soon as I see it is actually black and white, but there is also another major change which we're going to do to this image right at the very end of the process, which is going to change the visual impact to the overall image hugely. And it's quite simple actually, and not a lot of people will think about doing it. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. We've got this sequence of 6 images open in Lightroom, so obviously it's got Lightroom's crappy adjustments in the background. So what we're going to do is get ourselves onto an even playing field. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to select All, and then we're going to come down to Calibration. We're going to switch from the current version 5 back down to version 2. We're going to come over to Classic General Presets. We're going to hit zeroed. We're going to swap them all back to the current process version. We're going to go to Lens Corrections. We're going to go Remove Chromatic Aberration. We're going to come up to the Details panel. We're going to stick all the sharpening back on. We're going to stick all the colour noise reduction back on. And these images are shot on a Canon 5D Mark III. So I am going to add probably 10 noise reduction, and I think I'm just going to pull the sharpening back to around about the upper 20s. I'll leave everything else as it is by default. We'll go back to the Basics panel, and we're going to switch out from Adobe Standard to Camera Neutral, and then we're going to put the exposure back by double tapping on the word exposure. We're going to put all the contrast back, but we'll leave the blacks turned up 25. So now we've got rid of the majority of Lightroom's hideous, nasty little contrast increasing adjustments that it puts on in the background with the process version, and so we can now sort of go and evaluate the images a little bit more fairly. And that's at a 400th of a second, and that's at a 200th of a second. Now if we go and look at the rest of the images, the one big problem is here, it's this building here. This one's not quite so bad. It's probably nearly the same highlight value as this one here. This one's a little bit brighter, but the only thing is we've got this cloud behind the building here, and so we are actually losing definition at the top of the building, which is a little bit of a problem. So we're going to step back one. Well, if we go and have a look at the other images, you can see that we've totally lost the building there, and if I hit the J key to turn on the clipping indicators, you can see that those areas are blown, and there is nothing you can do about that. We cannot recover any detail in the majority of those areas that are marked up red now, because the pixels or photo sites on that part of those parts of the sensor have been totally overloaded with light, and they're basically just the same as you fill a coffee cup up with water. You can fill it right to the brim, but if you put any more in, it'll start to overflow, and we're in overflow conditions there, and therefore we can't pull any detail back. So we're going to step back one, and you can see we've got no clipping in the highlights there, but we're going to have to do a lot of work to the image to try and increase the separation, if you like, between the top of the building and those whitish clouds. And it's going to be difficult because tonally they're quite similar. But if we step back another one, we're golden there. I mean, we've got an awful lot of separation between the sky and the top of the building. We can see a little bit of Mori patterning creeping in there. That's where the pattern on the surface of the building is interfering with the pixel pattern or photosite pattern on the Bayer pattern sensor that the 5D Mark III's got inside it, and as is the majority of all other cameras. So this is always something you've got to watch out for, this Mori patterning, but at least it's not got any colour Mori on it. So, you know, this is, I mean, colour Mori looks awful, but this looks okay, you know, and on a print you're not really going to notice it very much at all, and you certainly won't notice it by the time I finish with the image. And you know me, I mean, you don't get, when you work as a commercial photographer, in other words somebody who sells their images, you just about manage to make enough money to cover the cost of taking the image, and then anything you earn on top of that is profit. But if you have to spend hours and hours and hours processing an image, then that cuts into your profit margin. So always remember this: you get paid for taking images, but you never get paid for processing them. So if you can get a first-rate image out of a shot with the minimal amount of work, then you're in the good seats. Let's put it like that. So just looking at the histogram for this image, and if we go to the previous one, which is a 400th of a second, if we look at the histogram now, bear in mind this isn't the histogram of the raw file, this is the histogram of the image that Lightroom is making from this raw file. It's two totally separate things. But as you can see, we've got a good 1.5 stops worth, if not 2 stops worth, of headroom here in our highlights. So if we adopt the principle of ETTR, the more exposure we give the highlights, the more exposure we're going to give to the shadows as well. So if we move on to the next image, you can see now we're probably only about 1/3 of a stop from actually peaking with these highlights, and so we've got plenty of relatively good detail in the shadow areas. Now this is where you might think, well, let's go and use the shadow areas off this shot here, and you know, it's all very laudable. We could actually try to make an HDR merge inside a Lightroom, but your only problem is HDR merges inside a Lightroom aren't going to work because the sky is in a different position, and if the sky is in a different position in these areas, it's also in a different position where it's being reflected in the surfaces of the building, and of course the reflections are a lot darker than the sky itself. Therefore you're going to get all sorts of ghost artifacts and this, that and the other. And you know, I mean, we could go and do a merge and it would probably look epic at this size as on a display. But if you're going to try and do a big print, or even a ginormous print like a 4 foot by 6 foot, it's going to look terrible because it's going to be full of all sorts of nasty little artifacts. And in reality, we don't need to do any form of HDR photo merge, because we only need to use one frame out of this bracketed sequence, and that frame is this one. So I'm just going to go quickly edit, select none, and then I'm going to come back to this one, and we're going to just make 1 or 2 tweaks and adjustments, because this is a really, really good frame. You can see we've got a bit of clipping in the shadows. We're not going to worry about that too much, because I'm going to effect a change to the shadows over inside Photoshop. We're not going to really worry about it too much here, but what we need to do is set the image up for taking it into Photoshop. And so I think we might just increase the exposure a little bit, just to try and get this little gap here closed out. And I don't really think we need to push it more than just over 0.5, 0.6 of a stop. And you can see we've opened up the exposure in these darker areas quite a bit. Now I'm going to do something which I don't ever really like doing, but I'm just going to tug the highlights down just a little bit, and we'll take them down by -20, and then I might, God forbid, just lift the shadows up a little tiny bit. And am I going to take the whites down? This is something else I don't really like doing, but we'll just do it there. And really and truly, if we care to look at the images of before and after, you can see how much more detail and exposure we've actually pulled out of this image from where it was originally, and it's not looking too bad at all. Let's just go into these shadowy areas at 100%, and we'll just go into the tone curve, and you can see, because we did this so-called process version swap, we've got this nice little subtle inverted S-shaped curve here. I'm just going to go into the blue channel, because I know it's the blue channel that might cause us a bit of a problem, and I'm just going to lift the black point in the blue channel, and that will negate any clipping in the shadowy areas. We might just go and warm the image up. We'll come back out to a fit to screen view. We might just go and warm it up a little bit, and then if we come into the HSL panel, we might just go and increase the saturation of the blues, and just take the cyans up with it as well, and maybe we'll just darken the blues down a little bit. So we've increased the saturation but darkened off the luminosity of the blues just ever so slightly, and I think that will just about do. Let's just check the detail slider again. Yep, that's looking all a-okay. So what we can do now is right click, and we will go edit, and bear in mind we're only editing this one single image out of this 6-shot exposure bracket. So here we go, there's the bloke with no head, yes, and there we go, as if by magic. So here we are in Photoshop CC 2019, the latest iteration of Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do to this, I'm just going to open Greg Benz's Lumenzia, and I'm going to look at a Darks 6 mask. There's a Darks 6 mask. I'm going to look at a Darks 5 mask, and I think we'll go for a Darks 5 mask, and we'll load that as a mask to a levels adjustment layer, and I'm going to leave the black point where it is, but I'm just going to tug down those highlights to not quite 50%. Are we going to move the midtones around? I think we'll just push the midtone slider just ever so slightly to the right. And if we go and turn that adjustment layer off, so there's our image in Photoshop straight from as we left it in Lightroom, and there's the little adjustment we've put on it using Greg Benz's Lumenzia. I'm now going to switch that into the luminosity blend mode, just to make sure we don't invoke any colour shift. So there is our image. Now then, the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to convert this to black and white, because it's screaming to be black and white. And we could sit here and do this in a very, very long-winded fashion. But for years I have used NYX Silver Efex Pro and NYX Silver Efex Pro 2 to actually do the old black and white shot whenever I wanted to produce a black and white. It just saves so much effort and time and work. And remember, as a working photographer, you don't get paid for your processing time. I'm just going to go filter. Well, I'm not actually. I'm just going to create a stamp visible layer. Shift Alt Command E to get this new stamp visible layer, and we're going to go filter, and we're going to go to Knit Collection. Now, I have to say that this Knit Collection is not the new one. This is not the one you have to pay for. This is the one that used to be distributed by Google for free. And if you can still get hold of it, you must know somebody who's got it. Sweet talk them into giving you a copy of it, because it'll work. And as far as I can tell, I'm not really kept abreast of it. I don't know if they've done any improvements to it over this original version. I mean, when it first came out a few months back, and you had to suddenly pay for it, it was exactly the same. So you never know. Anyway, I just used the free version, and here it is. And what I want to do is I want to go for a relatively high structure, but I'm going to switch the black and white conversion profile out to a film I used to love using back in the day. Yeah, Kodak Panatomic X. Oh God, it was gorgeous. Beautiful black and white film. So I'm going to switch out to a moderately high structure, and then I'm just going to come to my film types, and I'm going to switch out to ISO 32 Panatomic X. Yes, just look at that. Now then, if we just scoot down here, I'm going to turn the grain per pixel up from the default of 465 to 500, and then I'm going to make the grain as soft as I can. The next thing I'm going to do is emulate putting a yellow filter over the lens by clicking there. Yes, how cool's that? We might just take the strength up just a little bit, which might add some darkening to the sky. Don't want to go too far, and I think that looks really super sexy. So what we're going to do is click OK, and we'll not wait for the Knit Collection to do its little bit of magic. And there we go. I'm just going to blow the image up to 100%. I'll hold my spacebar key down, and we'll come and wobble off over to here. And I'm just going to pick up the spot healing brush, and we'll just come and scribble over that little dust mark there. And is that one there? No, that's a mark on my screen. You can't see that. And I think that's looking particularly sexy. Oh, what a shot. I actually wish it was mine. I really do. Woo. I've got a landscape photography talk coming up for a camera club next month, and I wish I could put this image in it. Oof, I do. I think it is gorgeous. And the really nice thing is, if we go in and look at these extreme shadow details here, this is looking superb. Just got that little bit of grain in there, and this just so reminds me of a big bromide print that we used to do. Now, oh, it's just gorgeous. I mean, if I'd done this as a shoot and process project, when I was on my City and Guilds way back in 1978, 79, if I'd have hung this on the wall, I would have got a distinction for this. But only on one condition. I would only have got a distinction for it if I'd done one other thing. If you'll notice, this image is very top heavy. Now watch this. Edit, transform, rotate 180 degrees. Wow! Now look how the impact of that image has changed just by flipping it 180 degrees. It's now, all the weight is at the bottom of the image. It's tailing off here, but it's balanced by this here. This is, oh, what? This is awesome as an image. And yet it's exactly the same image as it was before. So I'm just going to commit to this just to save file size. And we'll go layer flatten image, and we'll go file, and we will go save. And then we will come back into Lightroom, and there it is. Now you can see we've got a black clipping right in these edges here. Now for a digital image I might be tempted to leave that alone, but if I was going to print this I would need to go and do something about that. And all we're going to do is switch out to the RGB composite and just get the black point and just lift it up a little smidge, 0.4%. And that'll do. So there we go. There's our image. Got no clipping in it at all, and it looks absolutely stunning. The only thing that this image is about is visual impact, and it now looks an awful lot more impactful than it did this way up and in colour. Wowzers. And if I go and reset this raw file, and there's our shot. We might as well just hit the J key, and then we'll come and select that image there. We'll come to our library, and we'll go to contrast and compare. We'll tab out the sidebars, and we'll turn the lights out. There's our starting image, straight off the camera and imported into Lightroom, and this is what we've made of it. How sexy is that? Hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Don't forget, if you want me to do this sort of thing to your images to give you some idea for processing that you might not have thought of, just send me those raw files on Dropbox and we'll get cracking. And this image belongs to Jeff. Jeff, hope you like it, mate. Speak to you soon. Okay, everybody. Tooroo.